Overnight strikes into Israel and Iran continued for a third day, leaving over 230 people dead and neither country backing down. Leaders of some of the world's biggest economic powers have arrived in the Canadian Rockies for a G7 summit. Overnight strikes into Israel and Iran continued for a third day, leaving over 230 people dead and neither country backing down. Sirens were again heard over Tel Aviv and other cities, and buildings were destroyed in a neighborhood in central Israel, wounding at least 10 people. Emergency services also struggled to contain fires in Haifa, where an oil refinery was damaged. Iran raised its death toll on Sunday to 224 people, and health authorities reported that 1,277 were wounded. Iran also acknowledged Israel had killed more of its top generals, including the Revolutionary Guard intelligence chief Mohammad Kazemi. Israel said Iran fired over 270 missiles since Friday, 22 of which slipped through its Iron Dome defense system, leaving 14 people dead and wounding hundreds of others. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said she will convene an emergency meeting of the bloc's foreign ministers via video link on Tuesday. Leaders of some of the world's biggest economic powers have arrived in the Canadian Rockies for a G7 summit. This year, it is overshadowed by an escalating conflict between Israel and Iran and U.S. President Donald Trump's unresolved trade war. As summit host, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has decided to abandon the annual practice of issuing a joint statement at the end of the meeting. With other leaders wanting to talk to Trump in an effort to talk him out of imposing tariffs, the summit risks being a series of bilateral conversations rather than a show of unity. Some leaders have already had bilateral talks, such as Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and her British counterpart Keir Starmer. Donald Trump was one of the last leaders to arrive late on Sunday, a day after he hosted a controversial military parade in Washington, D.C. French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that Greenland is not to be sold or taken during a visit there on Sunday. Standing alongside the Danish and Greenlandic prime ministers, Macron expressed strong criticism of U.S. President Donald Trump's intention to take control of the Arctic territory.
The situation in Greenland is clearly a wake-up call for all the Europeans. And let me tell you very directly that you are not alone. And when a strategic message is sent to you, I want just for you to know that it's clearly perceived by the Europeans as targeting a European land. And this flag you have here is our common flag.
Sunday's symbolic stop to Greenland came as Macron was on his way to a G7 summit in Canada that Trump is also attending. While in Greenland, the three leaders held a meeting on a Danish helicopter to discuss security and visited a fast-melting glacier to highlight the consequences of climate change. Tens of thousands of demonstrators took to the streets in The Hague dressed in red to protest the Dutch government's policy towards Israel on Sunday. It was the second time the so-called Red Line protest took place in the Dutch political capital, exceeding the turnout for a similar event last month. Local media estimated the crowd at 100,000 people, while organizers put the numbers closer to 150,000. As they walked past the ICJ headquarters at the Peace Palace, the demonstrators symbolically drew a red line they say the government has failed to draw to halt Israel's campaign in Gaza. Alongside The Hague, another Red Line protest was also held in Brussels with an equally high turnout. Organizers estimated a crowd of 110,000 people. Several rallies have been held to draw attention to Israel's actions in Gaza, but Sunday's was the biggest rally so far.